Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our final day, day 3 of our sessions at GMIS. I'm Nadira Tudor, and I'll be guiding you for this part of the day, and there will be an end of summit official closing ceremony later on, which will commence at 12:30. First on our program is a panel discussion lasting an hour, looking at the future of the artificially intelligent manufacturing sector. This panel discussion will be followed by a session called Flash of Insight, how new age companies are using connectivity and the Internet of Things to gain a competitive edge. This will start at 11:15. This is going to be a fascinating 15-minute insight by Rahul Vijay, Global Head of Connectivity at Uber. So let's begin now. I'll hand over to Ryan Chilcote, Special Correspondent, PBS NewsHour, who will be your moderator for our first session, and that's about the artificially intelligent manufacturing sector, the future of work, Industry 5.0, learning, and human-centric automation. Ryan.
All right, thank you very much, Nadira. Good morning. Everyone in this room deserves a special prize for on day 3 showing up bright and early, ready to learn. And I think that that's a good investment of your time, considering the subject that Nadira just outlined for us. Let me begin by introducing our panelists today. I think we have 3 very unique and distinct perspectives on the topic. So without any further ado, I shall introduce them now, beginning in the middle with Q Chang from HIT Robot Group, currently making robots and doing AI in China as sort of intermediary between the MIT of China, HIT, if you will, and the market. A very interesting story. To his left, Dr. Adam Nagy. Thank you very much for coming. Deputy State Secretary, Minister of Innovation and Technology in Hungary. I mean, the title says it all. Not too many countries have ministries that are so focused on the issue of AI as Hungary. And finally, Pankaj Bajaj to my left from Bajaj Industries. Thank you all for joining us. Let's start by giving our audience a little bit of perspective of how you're approaching this question. Perhaps, Q-Ling, I could start with you, Yu-Chen, and ask you exactly where do you see not just the opportunities, because I think we generally get that the opportunities when it comes to AI and robotics are about sort of automating those repetitive things and reducing uncertainty in the manufacturing process. But where do you see the challenges when it comes to AI and robotics? Is the red button on?
Thank you, Ryan. It's a good question. And I'm from HIT Robot Group, a company focused on robotics and artificial intelligence, technology innovation, and commercialization. And our main business is to bring new technology into market. So why we choose AI to be our business is that we think AI is a very good market opportunity. But AI also brings great challenges to us. In traditional manufacturing industry, the aims of automation and intelligence is to make uncertain into certain. Why we bring robotics and artificial intelligence to traditional industry is that the uncertain is increasing all the time with the, society and industry development. Although the uncertain is unavoidable, we believe robotics and artificial intelligence technology can simplify sophisticated manufacturing, increase production efficiency, free people from tedious works, and improve working environment. And for the biggest challenges of AI for us is how to combine practical application and AI technology and how to achieve this combination. For example, when we visit different client companies, we found the demand of all these companies are different. And to satisfy each demand, it may also a challenge that we need to take much more time and efforts to realize the development of AI technology.
Which is interesting because, you know, there's a lot of people out there, including a gentleman here the day before yesterday, who was talking about the rapid pace of innovation, the rapid pace of adoption that is coming. I'm sure you've all heard the statistics that, you know, perhaps as many as half of the jobs in the United States could be automated over the next decade or so, thanks to the fourth industrial revolution. You're saying, well, maybe not so fast because there's a lot of robots and AI to be built to deal with the numerous tasks that have to be done. Thank you very much for that. Before we come to our policymaker, Adam, I want to turn to you, Pankaj, for a second and say, you know, I understand that you're very keen to learn as much as you can and introduce when you can AI and robotics. That said, you've got a significant manufacturing business already, which you were explaining to me the other day, really doesn't involve much AI and robotics. So why is that? What will it take for you to begin to introduce this fourth industrial revolution into your own business? And why the interest but not the practice?
Good morning, everybody. First of all, we have to understand that the technology exists, but we have to look at the economic viability and the social aspects which are very important to adopt of the new age technologies. For example, if we take the example of textile industry globally, there has been technologies in the apparel and the garment sector for the automation, but the changing consumer preferences makes it very hard for the adoption of these technologies. The social angle, what do you do with the millions of workers in Bangladesh? How do they adopt to these new age technologies? That's a challenge. When we talk about robotics, we think in terms of advanced manufacturing like automotive or stuff like that. But the bulk of the employment in this world still lies in the soft sectors. And it is pretty much harder for the automated machines to handle these soft skills like stitching and designing and stuff like that. This is one. The second aspect which we need to take care is the human aspect. You know, in our country, in India, people like to quarrel on the streets when they get into an argument with a co-driver. So that's, I don't know how it works in Russia or in the Western, but it's very common in back home. So
In the US, we call a lawyer and sue.
yeah. So I mean, what will happen when you have a small accident with an automated machine? I mean, would you have an argument with the machine, or what will the regulation do? So these are the kind of interactive experiences which are very important for the humans. You need to talk to your coworker, you need to engage with him, you need to say thank you to him, you need to learn new skills from him. That will take a much longer time, and the machine has to learn these human aspects. This, I think, is a very important subject, and which will keep large chunks of manufacturing much longer. It will take much longer for these aspects to get integrated into the system.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, our policymaker, Dr. Adam Naji. You know, as I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking to myself, why is Hungary so interested in AI and robotics? Why that focus?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the question, Ryan. Of course, we are interested. We must be interested, because that's not the future. That's already the present, what we are talking about. And reacting to what Q said, it's a rapid challenge. And reacting to what Pankaj said, it's a human society aspect as well. So as a state, as a policymaker, we have to deal with all these challenges to make the people of Hungary, the life of Hungarian people, safer, better, and improving their life quality. So, of course, we are making industry. There are a lot of manufacturing in Hungary. We are trying to develop, and that's the only way. That seems to be the only way to catch up with the tempo of AI. That's why we are interested.
And just to put things into perspective, how does one measure the level of robotization, if that's a word, or automation in a country? And where does Hungary sit?
Of course, there's a lot of type of measurements, but I can add the fact that there is an average of 100 robots per capita per 10,000 people in Hungary. So that's a measurement. You measure how many robots are used by 10,000 people. That's an international number, and Hungary stays somewhere in the average. With about 120 robots used by every 10,000 people there. So we are under the average level a bit, but we are trying to develop. We're trying to catch up with the tempo that Germany and Denmark and Norway, who are the top countries in robotization in Europe, we're trying to catch up with them.
Q, if I could ask you, your most of your clients come from which sectors? What's driving the demand for robots and AI in China?
In China, like our group, I think three kinds of sector, like automotive, electronic products, manufacturing, and medicine production is the three biggest area.
And Adam, if I could come quickly back to you, and then I'll come to you, Prakaj. Is that what you're seeing in Hungary?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, it's the same. The most robotized, most automatized sector is automotive factory or automotive sector, and of course, medical devices are also on the top. These are very precise workflows. So you need to be automatized if you want to succeed in these sectors.
Pankaj, I wanted to follow up on the question that you and I started with, which is about adoption and what drives adoption, or is an obstacle to adoption. If we imagine cost as being, one of, if not the biggest barrier in the transition to automation. Does that mean, in your view, that richer economies get a head start and poorer economies, as a result, have to play catch up and get punished for that?
Can you just repeat your question?
If cost is the biggest obstacle to adoption in automation and bringing in robots into the workflow, does that mean that companies and economies that have the least ability to do that, the poorer economies, are going to be behind the richer economies and be punished for sort of being forced to follow the richer economies?
Well, here we have to look at two issues. One is how do we, if let's take about the catch-up game which the poor countries are already trying to play with the rich countries by trying to get into the automation. But the challenge is what to do with the teeming millions of people. You have to re-educate them, you have to retrain them in different kind of activities, and nobody knows what kind of training will be required in the future to get into new areas of work. So we are looking at a future where you need to constantly retrain and engage with the people at different levels. That is a challenge for the poor countries, the countries which have large number of people who are not ready for the new industrial revolution. That is one. Secondly, talking about the cost aspect, the important thing is not the cost. The important thing is the changing consumer preferences. There are people who are ready to invest 100 million euros in automated line. But what happens if 2 years down the line, the consumer wants to change the preferences and you have to invest a further $50 million in that to retool the whole thing? Now that is happening more and more in this new world. 20 years down the line, you could see everybody wearing the same kind of clothes. Now people are getting richer, there are more designer stuff, for example, or you find different kind of vehicles on the streets, you from a small one to a big one. So this changing consumer preference is going to be a very big force in the future to drive automation.
Adam, the examples that you gave, the two countries that you mentioned, and in particular, of course, Germany, that are leaders in automation and robotization in Europe, Germany and Denmark. Do you feel that they have a sort of a head start because they're wealthier? Is that the sort of view that the Hungarian government takes, that wealthier economies are going to push this faster, and that's it thinks about things in that context?
Of course, these are wealthier countries than Hungary, but I think it's not only the cost part that we shall take care of. We have to educate people. We have a lot of creative minds in Hungary. We have a lot of good technicians, a lot of good expertise, and what we have to cope with is the pressure what the business world makes in Europe. But I think we can cope with that pressure by adding the cognitive skills of the Hungarian people, the intuition, and we have to robotize, of course, manufacturing, but we can learn from the German companies, from the Danish companies, and from companies around the world who are well developed. But we are on the way, and we are trying to catch with the tempo, and I think we are good at it.
And how does the government of Hungary go about training the population to make that transition?
The most important thing is to, from the one side, to train SMEs in Hungary, because they are the ones who are in direct connections with the bigger companies.
And just for our translators, I'll explain. that means small and medium-sized enterprises.
Yes.
So smaller businesses, not the huge businesses. Yep.
Yes, of course, smaller businesses are members of the value chain. They are working with bigger companies, and they can learn from the bigger companies, either technologies, either any kind of skills, automation. And what we are financing as a state is to give this possibility to our SMEs, the small businesses, to learn from the bigger companies. We are working with the bigger companies as samples. They are showing their skills, they are showing their technologies to the smaller companies, and that's how they develop together.
Chulong, I know that HIT Robot Group sells a lot of robots, a lot of AI, for a startup having just begun in December of 2014, doing $150 million of business last year is not a bad start. Do you do any education? Do you teach?
Yes, when it comes to the future education, I want to share some information about one of our robot division in industrial robot education. So with the development of robotics and artificial intelligence, a talent gap in AI just has arisen. And I think this gap would in some degree influence the development of manufacturing industry. And so education of robotics and artificial intelligence would be a key for future development. And to solve this gap, I think in the past we did much works. The first one is that we set up an online robot education platform. And this platform, we create more than 70 training courses and uploaded more than 3,000 videos to show the learning of industrial robot. And second is offline. We established several training centers in the main city of China, and about 70,000 of people joined this training, and now they are already in the front line as an operator in robotics applications and maintenance. And the third one is that we compiled the national industry robot textbooks and developed multiple purpose training equipment. And we think we have a very excellent result in the past. And we believe that the education of robot and artificial intelligence would accelerate the development of AI and the manufacturing industry.
And in your education division, your robot education division, how many people do you have working?
We have over 1,200 innovators.
So effectively employees of the company.
Yes.
And how many of those are engaged in the process of sharing that information with people outside of the company?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many people in the robot education division?
There is about 30 people teams in this division.
Wow, that's fascinating. That is very fascinating. Pankaj, how do you see learning changing in the future?
As my co-speaker just said, the amount of resources they are putting into education. So I believe that is going to be the key for the future. We need to re-educate the people. We need to break from the concept of having education in the early years of your life and then you have lifelong employment. We need to get into a constant changeovers between education and learning, because we do not know what the future in store for them. We need to look into flexible working hours, very often away physically from the workplace. Maybe we have only 3 or 4 working days, official working days, and other you have people working from different places in all kind of environment. We also are getting into a situation where a large number of people must be retrained, and there may be a short-term panic to retrain the people. So it's a distinct possibility that there will be a basic income for everybody so that they can manage this changeover, this turmoil, the time when they don't have a job and by the time they get into training and a new job. For example, what do you do with the millions of truck drivers across the globe when all of a sudden autonomous truck driving becomes the norm? The guy who has driven truck all his life, what do you do with him? You need to retrain him and you need to put him to a new profession. So these are going to be the major challenges for the future, and our education system has to be geared up for that. That is a very key issue for the universities, for the government. This is a big challenge we need to address. Yeah.
If I could come back to the Hungarian government's perspective, I mean, you were explaining to me that, and I want to talk about some of the other things you do to prepare the population for this transition and facilitate it, but staying on education for a second, it's still not quite clear to me how a nation prepares young people for this transition that is going to come, certainly in their professional lives. Do you teach them code, math, science, or, put on some Beethoven so that maybe they get more creative? What's the trick?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's very interesting. Of course, Hungarian kids are creative from the origin, so we have to educate them.
This is a DNA thing.
Yes, of course. We don't have to educate them in a way like this, but to turn it more serious. Of course, we are the ones now responsible for their future. So we have to deal with the tempo of what the bigger companies and AI dictate. So we are trying to educate them from the kindergartens. So we are trying to, of course, they're starting to learn languages, they're starting to learn maths and sciences in primary schools, but from the kindergarten, what they play with is also very important. So we give them Lego robots, for example, to play with those kind of robots that a child can use. Of course.
This is the government buying Lego robots for schools.
Not
helping the Danes, by the way, helping Denmark.
Yes, of course. We are financing it, and yes, there are some starting points. It's not a national level education system. We are trying to try it in some kindergartens. We are trying it right now. So there are pilot projects like this that we give the children robots to use when they play.
We've been talking about education. I know you do some financing as well to help with the transition. And then, of course, on the legislative front, you're working. Explain that to me.
Yes, sure. It's very hard to deal with the tempo of AI at the level of legislation. Of course, regulation, acts of laws, standards, accreditation processes all have to follow the tempo of AI. It's very hard to cope with, and it's very hard to put it in written form what we are requiring from who are from the companies who are using robots. So it's a daily pressure. In a European Union level as well, to prepare the perfect standards, to prepare the perfect processes, of course, with special care of safety instructions in manufacturing. But we are trying it, and there is, I think, a strong cooperation between the European countries to make European standardization a perfect one, and perfect one to use, of course, by the users. So that's what we are trying.
Pankaj, there are plenty of examples of companies introducing elements of automation and then deciding that that wasn't such a good idea and switching back. What does that tell us?
It doesn't tell us per se that it's not working, but what it tells us is that we need to little bit graduate our approach. We need to learn more from the feedback we get from the market forces and from the workforces. We need to teach the robots to learn human things, like how to work with a colleague, how to understand the customer whose needs are always changing. These are the key takeaways which must come back into the loop. I understand that machine learning has a way of inbuilding the feedback loop. I also understand that it can build the negative biases which they receive from the market. It can get biased in a human way of acting. But this is a challenge which must be taken by the industry, by the academia, to design new flexible systems which can change as per the needs of the market, not to get stuck in the old legacy system. Like 10 years ago, people got stuck in the huge computer systems which were legacy. They sunk the cost and then they become irrelevant. So my worry is that the IT systems and the automation of the future must be more nimble and flexible as per the market needs. Yeah.
Thank you. Chulong, I think everybody here craves details when they hear these kinds of conversations. You were telling me it would be very interesting for, I think, our audience to hear what kinds of clients you have, to the extent that you can share that. You were telling me yesterday about a client who just brought you cowhide. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yes, cowhide, because my work is involved in the artificial intelligence, and we are finding ways to find a more advanced technology to solve the practical problems. Like in 2 years ago, we started a project that is to inspect the follies of cowhide. It's just a cow skin, because this is very important in the cowhide producing procedures, because we can.
Because cowhides inherently have flaws.
Yes, it has flaws, and
people have to manually cut out those flaws.
People have to manually detect the flaw, and the working environment is very bad. And also, one important thing is that the grading of the highs, and this is also influence the factor's cost. So we invent a machine to automate inspect the flaw of the cowhide and to make this procedure more fluent and more smooth.
Very interesting. In Hungary, can you give us an example, a practical example of how robotics is being introduced on the micro level in a way that might surprise us?
There are no real surprises, but there are some examples that we learn back from the companies who are we financing and who are we trying to educate. And there are connections between medium-sized companies and small-sized companies, and they rent robots from each other. So they change their experiences, and there is a good pilot project, I think, for every country who are trying to deal with this robotization, that you have to make connections between your companies in the value chain, trying to urge them to learn from each other. So there are no real special examples. That we are trying to spread all the robots that are used in Hungary between the Hungarian companies. So they share each other their robots, and they learn each other how to use their robots. that's a good example, I think.
Pankaj, going back to your Indian car crash example, how much do you think the industry right now is thinking about this issue of the interaction in the future between the automated, the robot, the inanimate, and the human? Do you think that there's enough thought going into this right now?
There is talks going on. There are practical feedbacks coming into the industry, into the academia, people who are developing. But this kind of feedback is very hard to find. It very often happens by experience. So my humble suggestion is that we need to be a little careful in getting into legacy systems. We need to be a little calibrated, going bit by bit. Probably our expectation of getting things implemented in a time horizon of, say, 5 years, that needs to be elongated to 10 years so that it's more near to the markets. That's the most important thing, because we can harvest the advantages of technologies in the long run if we make the right investments. But if we rush up with things, then we may land up in a difficult situation where we may land up alienating our customers and our employees.
Chulong, let me put that question to you. You were telling me that just in one room, that is, or I guess giant room, that's like 2,000 square meters, you have many, many robots. And as part of your educational process, students come in and interact with those robots. You've got all these employees. Have you learned anything about strange things that happen when humans are around robots for a long period of time?
Yes, we have a college in Suzhou. It's just like a lab, and we welcome the people, no matter how old are you, you can come to join us and to share the pleasure of robotics learning.
And in this lab where you have all of these robots, and in your other sort of industrial production sites, are you learning anything? Is there anything interesting about when you have a human and a robot next to one another for a long period of time? Do strange things, interesting things happen when in terms of their interaction?
Oh, you mean the human beings cooperate with the robots?
Yes.
Yes. In my opinion, the robots just there is industry robot and a co-robot. The
co-robot being a robot that is sort of almost attached or working right alongside the human being.
If we use the co-robot, that the co-robot can work together with human beings, and the cobots would not give injuries and would give protection to human beings, and it is very safe in this life. Yeah.
So presumably, the human being working with a cobot,
cobot,
to use that term, is happy that they have the cobot attached to them.
But in the factory, and mostly used is the industry robot, and because industry robot can be the one gives high efficiency in the production.
Yeah. Has HIT Robot Group produced, or is it producing any cobots?
We are just at the beginner of the cobots, and we are also the general distributor of some cobots, famous cobots in China.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Adam, I'm a little bit out of my depth here. Is it cobot or cobot? I guess it must be cobot, yeah? Do you have any cobots in Hungary?
Yes, we do have. I think the interesting thing about cobots, which are collaborative robots, is that Of course, a human being and a robot will not make friends when they're working together, but of course they have to work together, and that's the new thing. This is Industry 5.0.
I mean, it makes me think, on the most basic level, and this is just, early stages AI. I, for one, really get angry when I call my bank and have an extended non-conversation with an automated voice on the other side.
Cobots will be the members of manufacturing rather than services. So I think it's not that problem to talk to. It's not a common problem to talk to a robot. We have to work with them. And I think the most interesting thing about this is how people will use to work with those kind of robots, that they are not only directing, but they are using as a third or fourth hand of him. So that's the interesting thing, how we educate, how we make people braver to work with robots. Because I think there is a fear from new things is an ancient and natural human feeling. So that's what we have to talk about from the psychological way.
I'm going to ask it, Pankaj, when it comes to the future and AI and robots, what's your biggest concern? Another way of putting it would be, because you're obviously very enthusiastic about it, what really worries you about it?
What worries is our response to the short-term turmoil is what is the most difficult aspect. The governments, the industry, the academia, they have to hold hands together to handle this disruption. It has happened in the past. A lot of doomsday talk have taken place in the past. All has been naysayed. People are saying that it's going to be different this time. Of course, it's going to be different, but the result will be the same. The demand is generated by the human needs. So there will be a continuous calibration of demand based on the new human needs, and the man and the machine have to constantly change, learn the new ways. We've spoken about the economic and the social viability of using the artificial systems. Little bit about the customer experience, how it will change in the future. Let's take the example of people like to go to the massage parlor, they go for the personal salon. So you may have a machine in the future which can give you very refined kind of a haircut and massage. But the big question is, would we like to get a haircut from a machine, or would we like to engage a human being? We are social animals. We like to engage socially with human beings. So that is the key. Maybe the situation will emerge. We have a premium class of people engaged in giving service, and we have a lower-end machine which gives the same service. So, end of the day, we are social animals. We have biological needs. Our expectations are there to engage with our co-workers. So, these customer changing preferences are going to come more and more into the future. In the sales profession, when 20 years ago we had the emails and other kind of IT systems hitting, people thought that sales will become an automated process. But what we have seen, it has become more personalized. Now, no more we write an email to the sales department, we write to a person. Even the cobots have got names. 30 years back, it was different. We could communicate with the sales department of a company. So the result is we are getting more personalized. We are building more bonds with our fellows. So this is the key for the future.
Thank you. Chulong, you are a cheerleader for AI and robotics. You are a huge fan. And yet you must have some concerns, some worries about the future. What's the biggest one?
I think the most concern is that if the artificial intelligence developed so rapidly, and the intelligence would surpass the human being wisdoms, and it may cause some new troubles.
This is the machine becomes wiser than the human.
Yes, but I think it still would be a long time to be there.
Yeah.
Before we touch this point, I think we already find the ways to solve this problem.
So you think it's possible that robots can become wiser than humans? In my case, I'm sure it's quite possible.
I think so.
Perhaps it'll take significantly longer.
The job of the moderator will be done by a machine? The job of a moderator will be done by a machine in the future?
No, why not? At least machines can be good at listening, perhaps better than human beings. Government of Hungary, as a government official, your biggest concern as we move into this space? As we move into the Industrial Revolution, what's your biggest concern?
There are a lot of concerns, of course, but I still think that a robot or machine being wiser than a human is quite possible. But don't underestimate human beings, because we are who created those robots. So I still think that we can direct and we can harmonize life of human beings with robots being out there. So the biggest concern is that what will happen in the poorer countries, what will happen in the poorer regions. Can they cope with this business type of pressure? That's a concern as a national level also, and I think that's a concern as a worldwide level, at a worldwide level.
And we heard Pankaj, I'll have to make this the last question, but I'd like to direct it to you again. You know, when we talk about the introduction of AI and robots, there's a lot of talk about how, unlike past technological advances, and this is an arguable point, that this will lead to even greater challenges in terms of income equality, or to create a greater divide between the wealthy and the poor. And you heard Pankaj there mention the concept of a universal basic income to bridge that transition, UBI. We hear a lot about it nowadays. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes, I think it's quite possible what you mean.
By the way, I'm well aware that I just asked a government official for a policy view.
And I'm aware of my role as a government official, so...
So we'll continue to be provocative.
Yeah, thank you. So I will just reply shortly. Yes, I think there is, but to be honest, it's quite possible that there will be a fight or something like that between for the more specialized robot techniques and the more specialized modern technologies. But I think learning from history, life always balances itself. So there will be some equality demand from the responsible leaders of the countries, I think.
So if not UBI, if not universal basic income, you definitely see the forces aligning to push for some kind of, should it appear on the horizon, some kind of solution.
Because I think the modern technologies, as Pankaj already added, they are coming from user experiences, user demands, and the highly developed countries are also users. So their demands will be satisfied when some equality will be spread between the countries.
Thank you very much. Pankaj Bajaj from Bajaj Industries, Chulong Chen, Vice President of HIT Robot Group, and finally, Dr. Adam Nagy, Deputy State Secretary, Ministry of the Innovation and Technology of Hungary. Thank you very much. I found it fascinating. As the sign says in front of me here, our time's up. But please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you for coming at such an early hour for this conversation. Hope you have an opportunity to ambush our guests up here and ask them more questions.
Big thank you to our distinguished panelist and moderator, of course, Ryan Chilcott. You can leave the stage now. Thank you. Coming up later on this morning is our In Conversation session focusing on man with machine, not man versus machine, which starts at 11:30. But straight on to our next session now, a flash of insight on how new age companies are using connectivity and the Internet of Things, IoT, to gain competitive edge. Please welcome onto the stage Rahul Vijay, Global Head of Connectivity, Uber.
Good morning, Yekaterinburg. How are you folks doing? So the fourth industrial revolution envisions an industry that is rich of data, an industry that is smarter, and it also envisions an industry that is hyper-connected. Connectivity can be a competitive advantage during the fourth industrial revolution. My hope today is to use Uber as an example to inspire you folks to look at connectivity as a competitive advantage and also as your friend and not as a foe, because these connected things are coming. A little bit about me. So I started moving from building technology to consulting about technology and doing some marketing on tech to doing sales in tech, and had a tech startup. And I've been doing partnerships and for a while. And I sit on some boards and based in San Francisco, California. So to explain connectivity, I want to explain a little bit about Uber so that you understand the challenges and the exciting opportunities. And what does connectivity mean for a company like Uber? And talk about what some of the things that we're using as competitive advantages here at Uber. So Uber's completed 10 billion trips, and we're growing 35% year on year on our gross bookings. What that means is the money we make before we give a cut to the drivers, and around 20% year on year net revenue growth. Our Eats business is growing at 108% gross bookings, cut before drivers and restaurants, and also growing at around 31% on net revenue. We have around 93 million riders globally. To put it in perspective, this is 1/3 of the population of the United States. And we also have around 30% growth in our active monthly user. We have around 3 million drivers on our platform. To put it in perspective, we're not an employer, but these are people looking for work on a monthly basis, and we are only surpassed by US Department of Defense, a number of people looking for work on a particular platform. We're in 70 countries, 700 cities, around 22,000 employees worldwide. We also have agents that take your fare queries and questions, located in 25 different countries, around 50,000 agents. We have what we call hubs. These are locations where if you want to be a driver, you can go up and sign up to be an Uber driver. And I just had to update this number. We are doing around 1 million concurrent trips every moment. So that adds up to 200 trips every second. So that is the kind of connectivity and infrastructure we have to support. What are the product lines? So UberX, this is a flagship product that competes with the taxis around the world. We have Uber Pool. This is our answer to taking carbon off the road. We have Uber Select. These are premium cars. We have Uber Black. These are premium cars with professional drivers. We have Uber XL. These are for large groups. Uber SUV. These are large cars, premium cars with professional drivers. Uber Assist. in a lot of parts of the world, it is actually legal to have a ramp on your taxis, but for example, in London, Jamal actually has Uber as a godsend because he tries to get taxis, but he's not able to because they don't stop for him. Now, they have a product called Uber Assist that he can use to hail his ride. We also have Uber Pet live in many markets. These are pet-friendly rides. Uber Lite. And unfortunately, the 3G and 4G connectivity is not ubiquitous in a lot of parts of the world. And we have app that works in 2G. It's live in countries like India and Brazil. Very light. We have Uber for Business. We sell into your travel departments to automate your expenses, and it automatically goes into your T&E system. Uber Eats. So until now, Uber has been in the business of people moving people. So these are drivers moving riders. And then, as we build this network, people then asked, can we use this network of people to move things? And the answer was yes. So we started moving things like food. And this business is growing faster than Uber traditional business because probably taxi business is regulated and food industry is not. Uber Freight. This is live in America. 1/4 of freight is 4 times bigger commuter transportation in America. And it is the lifeblood of America. If you buy a thing from Walmart or Target, you probably have it delivered through freight to the store. And it is still a very traditional business, so to bringing efficiency and using Uber technology to optimize that industry is a huge opportunity. We have Uber Health. 1/3 of US health appointments are canceled because patients do not have a way to get to the hospital. And this is a big problem because these are issues for insurance companies as well, because prevention is better than cure. So they will pay for you to get to the hospital. And this is a HIPAA-compliant platform, web-based platform that we've built for hospitals for them to hail ride for patients. With autonomous vehicles, as you know, driving is one of the biggest killers of human beings in the world. And if we can have a way to make driving safer, it is indeed a noble initiative, and it'll, of course, make your ride cheaper as well. We have another business for scooters and bikes. So this is the advent of micromobility in cities. For example, if I go from San Francisco downtown to the train station, it will take me around 25 minutes on an Uber ride. But if I take one of these bikes, it's around 12 to 13 minutes. Cut down your time in half in really busy metros. We have Uber Moto, so somebody will come and pick you up on a bike, and this is live in a lot of Asian cities and preferred mode of transportation for people to get around. We have Uber Boat. This is live in Croatia. You can actually take it on the Adriatic coast between Croatia and Venice. We have Uber Drones. So we talked about people moving people, and we built this network of people, and we said, can we do people moving things? And the answer was yes. So we built products like Uber Eats, Uber Freight. And then we said, okay, people are moving people, people are moving things. Can things move people? Probably yes. So that's the advent of businesses like scooters and bikes. These are things moving people in cities. And then we said, can things move things? Probably. Can we have a drone actually delivering Uber Eats? So these are avenues of how interconnected things have become, where it's not only people moving people and things, it's things moving people and things as well. We also have Uber Elevate. This is our Uber Air program. As you know, as cities become crowded, we have built skyscrapers because the only way to grow is up. And similarly for transportation, there's going to be a saturation in transportation options on the roads. So we feel that the way to go is up. And these are elevated vertical takeoff and landing devices that we are trying to build with partnerships across the industry. So this is what we're dealing with. Now, what does connectivity and IoT mean for serving products and services like this? So messaging. So this is super important for Uber because most of these 3 million drivers are on the road trying to serve people like you and me. And when they're on the road, the best way to reach them is actually through messaging. And SMS is a heavily used medium for us, one of the biggest senders of SMS in the world. And it's a very underutilized medium in this world, and it's pretty effective. So we use it to communicate to our drivers on the road. We also use it to communicate to riders in certain markets where it's not highly regulated, and heavy usage for us to reach the end consumer. We also use it for fraud prevention using one-time passwords when you actually log into an app. We also figured out we're spending a lot of money on messaging, and then we partnered with our product team to actually build an in-app chat where you can actually chat with your driver and driver can chat with you. We're also a heavy consumer of voice. So we power all the communications between riders and drivers. And also, one of the problems that we faced was if the fraud prevention SMS does not go through, because a lot of people sign up with their landline numbers to join Uber. As you know, SMS is not delivered to a landline number. So we figured out a system where you can actually convert text to speech and actually call the landline number to give the code. So hence powering revenues for Uber. We also have safety as the #1 priority for Uber. Whenever I travel across the world, one of the biggest problems people talk about is we want a medium that's safe, and especially for women. And we had incidents where we used to expose the phone numbers of riders and drivers, and that used to be a big problem because some of these drivers used to take these numbers and sometimes harass people after the call. So we figured out we should have a way where people can talk to each other without exposing numbers, and figure out a solution where we could anonymize these phone calls that happen between riders and drivers. And then we figured out we are doing billions of minutes on these communication between riders and drivers, and it's become too expensive. And then we invented a Skype-like button on our app and reducing our costs, hence adding to our profitability around 90% on our voice calling between riders and drivers. We also do business in 70+ countries, and we allow drivers to call in to Uber. And what that means is we used to use international toll-free numbers for them to call in. But as you know, it's super expensive to have international toll-free numbers. And then we went out, talked to our partners, got local numbers in these markets. It's important because you need to force that local relationships in each of these markets to make something like that happen. So we have around 50,000 agents worldwide in 25 different countries with 10 different BPO providers helping take support queries for Uber, various products. And our team helps with the whole technology stack that helps with all the contact center things that are required, like workforce optimization, automated call handling, inbound, outbound calling, customer relationship management. So these are things that have to be bleeding edge for us to churn out these 15 million trips a day. So every third trip ends up in some sort of a contact. What that means is either they're contacting the rider or driver or contact centers. So we really have to be on top so that if you ask a question to our contact centers, they respond within a certain timeline. We also had a problem where Uber drivers were signing up to be Uber drivers, but they were not actually driving. And the drop-off was around 20–30%. And we had a huge call center team that used to just call drivers up saying, hey, I see you signed up to be an Uber driver, but why are you not driving? And we hacked together an automated calling solution, which eliminated the huge team of these call center people who are calling drivers up, asking why they're not driving. And it actually improved the efficiency and conversion rate of drivers. Because drivers is a huge, we consider drivers as supply. And it's a very supply-driven market because the more drivers you have, the less ETA you have, the less cost it takes for you to take a ride. And so while I have many driver product individuals in the team, there are very few rider growth individuals because it's a very supply growth driven market. We also don't have hard phones at Uber offices anymore. And let's talk about networks. So there are many networks that we consider within Uber. What we call Prime Network, this supports our 15 million trips a day, the 1 million concurrent trips that can happen. And also, these are networks of 6+ data centers and POPs around the world that connect the transatlantic connections, Trans-Pacific, the dark fiber, the lit fiber, the internet to key locations. We also have corporate networks. We have around 800 offices worldwide. So each of these offices act as our hub for a particular city, and we have connectivity to these offices on a separate network as well. We have hub networks. These are 800 locations worldwide that you can sign up to be an Uber driver. They walk in, they can get papers, documentation done, they can even browse their internet, they can even get a massage in some locations, and these are connected. We have our autonomous car networks. So these are the 300 to 400 self-driving cars that are being tested on the roads in Pittsburgh and few other locations in America. And to put it in perspective, a car going around emits around 2 terabytes of data. So if you just do the math, 2 terabytes of data, 300 cars a month, and driving around, let's say 6 to 8 hours a day, that emits around. That's the same amount of data the state of Hawaii consumes in a month. So you can imagine if that 300 cars become 3,000 or 30,000 or 300,000 or 3 million, it's really a big data problem. So these are data centers on wheels. They really have a compute stack on the back of the car, and they're doing big computations on these cars. We also have our contact center network that is separate, that's connecting these 25 locations and 50,000 agents. We also do a lot of peering arrangements. This is something where we are bypassing the internet by having a peering relationship with the cloud providers, with the software vendors, and with the telcos, so that this is the benefits of actually not having net neutrality too, because you are using private connectivity to actually make your app faster. We also have days where using Uber, you probably have noticed surge pricing. So the 2 busiest days in America are Halloween. I guess people don't like to dress up and drive. And New Year's Eve, people probably don't like to drink and drive. Now, my bandwidth utilization on these days is 3x. Now, how can I only pay 3x during the surge and not during the rest of the year? So we are talking to companies that can do bandwidth on demand as well. IoT network. So as I mentioned, we are a network right now of people moving things and people, and also things moving people and things. So as the things grow and things are moving people and things, we need IoT as the core competitive advantage. And we have a huge IoT network and use cases that are doing bikes and scooters and many other use cases at Uber. We also have wireless. We provide cell phones to all our employees, 25,000 employees worldwide. We also have internet on the go solutions for employees on the road trying to talk to the drivers and power their connectivity. We have wireless connectivity to offices. So sometimes when you start a new office, the procedure is very simple. We hire a general manager for a new city. The general manager hires an operations manager. The operations manager's responsibility is to create supply. And let's say a basic network of 50 drivers in a city to start off. And once that supply is there, the marketing manager is hired. Marketing manager's responsibility is to generate demand. There you go, you have supply and demand, a business is born, and sometimes this happens in less than 4 weeks. But as you know, internet connectivity in some of these locations takes 6 months. So we have some hacks where we try to put together some custom solutions where we can launch an office within a few weeks, and we rely on wireless connectivity for that. We also have IoT networks. So this is the layout of a typical self-driving car. You can see the LiDAR on top with the sensors and video sensors. And we also have an IoT modem on top of this car. And without this IoT modem, you really can't locate this car because you cannot really call a driver when it's on self-driving mode. So IoT really is a key component in these self-driving cars. We also have, when in the era of 5G, which promises 5 millisecond latencies and mobile broadband, we have these vehicles, which are self-driving vehicles, going on the road. And we feel a lot of these communications can be done vehicle to vehicle. And in an era where edge computing is also imminent, we feel that we have technologies that have probably 50 to 80% of the compute happening locally, and not having it communicate back to our data centers. If a self-driving car looks like this, what would you do? Would each seat have a Netflix connection? How would you really have that delivered? Would each of them be a separate pipe? Would each of them be a separate IoT connection, or one pipe having Netflix sliced? So these are problems that people need to think about, and some people are actively working on. So we had a big problem in Uber Freight, which was in the freight industry, if you're idle, you don't really make money, or based on your contract, you pay money for people to sit idle. So sitting idle is really not a good thing in the freight industry. So if a Uber Freight truck comes to a dock, it probably takes 3 to 4 hours for undocking. Then what we did was we put an IoT solution on the trailer and had it communicate back to the dock. And that reduced the waiting time by half, which means you're giving it back to the shipper, not paying too much, or the driver gets paid more for not waiting. We have these mapping vehicles go around 70 to 80 countries around the world, mapping roads in 3D fashion. And these then go to our agents back in our office, who then scrub this map data and then put that back into Uber Maps. And IoT solutions powering map collection. We have dash cam-based IoT solutions that help with insurance purposes, with also safety purposes. And these are IoT-based solutions that transmit data. We also have OBD2 dongles-based IoT solutions that actually help with usage-based insurance and reducing insurance costs. Insurance costs is one of the biggest costs for Uber because they self-insure its rights. And Uber figured out we are spending too much money on insurance. Now we formed an insurance entity and the top auto insurers in America. This is how a typical Uber Eats kiosk looks like, a typical restaurant kiosk looks like. And you can see all these tablets, and these are all provided by different food delivery apps because they don't want to compete with the real estate on the desktop. And all of these are connected. And now, usual connection is Wi-Fi. Now, what happens when Wi-Fi goes down? You need some sort of connectivity to help you power, because Wi-Fi is not as ubiquitous in different parts of the world. So hence, if you put IoT connection in these tablets, IoT picks up when the Wi-Fi goes down, and hence you're powering revenue for your company. We have these drones, fleet managed via IoT. No way to find the drones without IoT. So it's a critical component in actually powering your business, because if your drone does not deliver your food, you'll probably not pay for it. These bikes are also IoT connected. Without these IoT connections, you're not going to find these bikes if you open your app in a city that the bike is live in. And that's the way we communicate to the bikes. And it's super important to get the connectivity stack right to power your business. Similar with scooter fleets as well. These are IoT connected scooters. And also we have technologies that you got to be aware of, because if I'm launching 1 million bikes, and if I'm launching it with a particular telco carrier, what happens when it comes to the contract expiry time at the end of 2 years? How much leverage do I have with these companies? Probably none. And so that's why there are certain technologies where if you adopt it, like USCC, you can actually change these telco companies over the air for these million bikes after 2 years if you don't like it. So these are things that you have to factor into mind for designing IoT right for your cities, for your countries, for your companies. How do you turn it into a competitive advantage as I wrap it up? So there are a lot of these things that we talked about Uber, we talked about what it means to have, be connected and have IoT in a company like Uber. So give you some examples. For example, we were trying to launch certain markets like India back in 2013, and we couldn't break into India partly because the smartphone adoption was pretty poor. So no smartphone, no Uber. So now what we had to do was to cut some deals with the telco companies there where, we used to probably get a phone for, let's say, $25 with a plan, and we used to give it for drivers for maybe $30. And that powered the business. So you're using connectivity in your partnerships to actually power your business and even start a new big market like India. So this is the network coverage map for the top 4 carriers in USA. And as you know, one of the competitive advantage in the telecom industry is your competitors' cellular coverage data, which is not self-reported, but which is actual. So Uber has these 3 million cars around the world that are driving around on different cell networks, and we have live feed data on the cell coverage and cell handoff of these different networks. Now, telco companies spend a lot of money on actually finding out the competitors' information on coverage and optimizing their network to that. Now, Uber as a company has this live information, can provide it via an API on a real-time basis to these telco companies around the world, hence using connectivity as an ancillary revenue opportunity and powering business for Uber. So connectivity as a competitive advantage. If you think of your company as not just what you do, but also as a network company, it powers a lot of ancillary use cases and opportunities. As you know, if some of you who know the SMS industry knows, one of the biggest problems in the SMS industry, messaging industry, is that we don't know whether the message has been delivered. Because the telcos don't tell you the message has been delivered, they just tell you the SMS has been sent. So in the world of messaging, it means there are 2 things. There's a peer-to-peer messaging, where I'm sending you a message, and there's A2P messaging, where you're sending from an app to a person. So if you have received an SMS from any app, that's called A2P, and that is a huge opportunity for telcos whose revenues are flailing. But the problem is, the architecture is such that we're not able to find out the delivery receipts. Now, there are technologies out there where if you have an app like Uber installed on your phone, Uber can tell whether any SMS has been delivered to your phone. So can any of the apps that are on your phone. And with Uber having 100 million plus users, it's an easy opportunity for us to sell to other SMS companies on a problem that they have not been able to solve using technologies that are available and out there, hence driving ancillary revenue opportunities. We also have opportunities where we are actually keeping revenues up, because if Wi-Fi goes down, which used to happen, these restaurants never used to be able to take Uber Eats orders. So no Wi-Fi, no business. And hence, we put IoT SIMs into these tablets, and the Wi-Fi went down, the LTE picked up, and the revenues kept going. So using connectivity really as revenue drivers and cost drivers in a company. So with that thought, let me say that if you think about this cosmos of possibilities out there, when you think about your company as not just what you do, but as having other competitive advantages, and even connectivity in some of your cases. For Uber, for example, we have 3+ million drivers who are partially utilized. They're not driving for 40 hours a week on Uber platform. Now, if I think of them as a network, can I use half of their time, maybe the rest 50%, on creating a network of, let's say, repair technicians or handymen or gardeners or some other network that they can be utilized for? Then I'm not in transportation business, I'm actually in the labor business. So think of all the possibilities that can happen. Now, if you think about all the million-plus bikes out there that are IoT connected, can I have a little bit of cell tower on the edge of these devices, hence being an IoT network out there, which actually provides infrastructure to various telecom companies. So when you think about it like that, when you think about your company as a connected company, you know, the possibilities are endless, and I urge all of you to rethink your business model and come up with things that you've probably not thought about. With that, thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll be outside if you want to talk.
Huge thank you there to Rahul Vijay, a Global Head of Connectivity for Uber, for an incredible insight, really. Time now for our final session, so please do stay seated there, of the GMIS Summit. We're now going to go in conversation about man with machine, not man versus machine. And I'll hand over now to our moderator, Declan Curry, which is journalist and news presenter. Declan.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dama Podessa, good morning. Nadira, thank you so much for your flawless and fantastic moderation this morning, and for your introduction to this discussion, man with machine, not man versus machine, looking at the role of robotics and automation in the workplace and in wider society. Work is of immense importance to human beings. The phrases good job or a good day's work are signals of the highest praise. Work gets us up in the morning, puts food on the table, keeps us comfortable, warm and dry. And career advancement, getting ahead at work, gives us a feeling of success and fulfillment. For many, the work that we do helps define who we are as individuals. So what happens in a world of automation, robots, and connected intelligent machines? Will the jobs we do become obsolete? Will our very idea of work have to be redefined, or is the future something much less dramatic? To discuss this, I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Suzanne Baylor, who's the General Secretary of the International Federation of Robotics. We have Jessica Lee Jones, who has responsibility for industrial processes at one of the world's largest and most innovative electronics companies. She has also been celebrated by Forbes magazine as one of the business stars of the future. She is one of the Forbes 30 under 30. And we have Chris Möller, who's the Managing Director of the Robotics Hub. Just for the sake of clarity, tell us what the Robotics Hub is. Click the button.
There we go. Thank you.
Our first lesson in automation today.
Yeah, not a robot. So the Robotics Hub is mostly a venture capital fund focused on early stage company creation, you know, in areas we think that robotics can be very transformative in a positive way to our society. But we're a little bit more than a traditional VC fund. We like to backstop what we do on the investment side with really tailored product development, infrastructure, and other tangible support to making companies more successful.
Thank you very much. We will welcome your input throughout this discussion. Let's bust some myths to start with. Suzanne, I'll start with you. Automation is going to lead to a jobs catastrophe. Millions of jobs will be lost. True or false?
Yeah, there are many studies and many media catching on those studies, and it's communicated over and over again, looking at this destructive effects of automation. Of course, automation basically is used to replace labor in a certain task. That's what automation is for. We have some jobs that robots are really good at, and humans tend to be either slow or not well in quality. So we need to stay competitive, and as company and also as countries, we definitely will need automation, and we also have to make sure in the coming years that also SMEs can make use of automation technologies, which is so far still a hurdle.
So this is the argument that automation and robotics will give us better jobs, safer jobs, more interesting jobs.
That is indeed the case. And to also look at coming back to the studies on the destruction side effects, apart from that we automate certain tasks for different reasons, we see that it leads to new jobs being created in other areas around those manufacturing companies. We can actually see a certain correlation between robots used in companies and the number of jobs increasing in those companies. There's quite good statistics on that. And I can also say, if you're looking at those myths about millions of jobs being destructed, if you look at the number of new robots being installed in factories every year, it's just not fitting to that equation that it's leading. So we are at the IFR collecting the global statistics on robotics. We see that about 384,000 robots have been installed in the past year in manufacturing. If a robot was even to replace 1 or 2 workers, we couldn't destroy millions of jobs with those robots.
The challenge is that that very sensible and calm argument is not cutting through. When the media talks about this, when labor groups talk about this, they are consumed with fear.
They are consumed. Sorry. Yeah, I can well understand. A lot of fear is created because you don't know the situation quite well. So whenever you look at what robots are capable of doing, you get a much better understanding. So let me take some example where we really need robots, because we can't do that without automation. That's, for example, taking the welding jobs. We don't find enough welders for industry, and welding is a significant point in industry, in machinery industry, in metalworking industry, automotive industry needs welding. So if we want to stay competitive and keep up our production, we need to automate this kind of jobs.
Thank you.
Well, no, and I think that the two of you just hit on something really important in the process of that conversation. You know, what you said, the argument that it's man versus machine is largely an emotional one. The argument that it's man and machine together building a better future is a fact-based one. And it's always harder to get fact-based arguments to win over emotional ones, because people at their heart are emotional. But it's also part of why we can't ever really be fully automated, at least with anything near the current technology, because emotions and judgment and those sort of things is valuable in almost every career on Earth.
And which cannot be learned by machines to the best of...
Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, you could teach machines wisdom, but you can't teach them judgment, at least not currently. And wisdom helps make, you know, repetitive tasks and boring tasks and dangerous tasks better, safer, etc. But it doesn't replace the fact that someone ultimately has to make a decision, and that someone is still a person. So why not couple, you know, the wisdom with the judgment and have a better package?
So yeah, it's no, I lost my phrase. Yeah, we really need the robots, and we need to educate people on that, not only on using robots, but also understanding what robots actually are good for. And we should also shed a closer look at what robots actually are less good at because then we have less fears about robots taking our job. If I look at my daily tasks, there are certainly some tasks of what I have to do that could be automated, and I probably would love to give that over to automation. But there are other tasks that I think will not be automatable in the next 5 to 10 years and might never, ever be automatable. We have a human dexterity, we have human flexibility, we have a lot of tacit knowledge. We can do a lot of things without being able to explain why we are doing that and how we are doing that. The classical robots we're using so far in factories are based on programming, where you have to teach the robot exactly what to do. So far we are not progressed in machine learning and AI that we could automate that. There are some ideas that in the future we have some self-learning machines that could do some unsupervised learning. So far, this kind of technology bases on a huge amount of data, which is maybe available in some B2C applications, but we don't have this large amount of data in manufacturing because we have to start collecting that. Digitization might actually help us start collecting, investing in the collection of data. Nevertheless, we also have to be clear that we have a lot of proprietary data, company-sensitive data that companies are not even willing to share, so we can learn from those data.
Okay, and we'll develop those thoughts throughout our discussion. Jessica, from your experience in industry, working for one of the largest and most innovative companies on the face of this planet, how do you judge the fear that robots will take over the workplace?
So I think the points made on both sides are really, really valid here. There's a lot of scaremongering. And you know, in my experience, the reason why there is that scaremongering is because it's something new. It's something that maybe we don't quite understand yet. We can't quite rationalize. And, you know, humans are emotional. They're also creatures of habit, and they don't generally like that routine and that habit being challenged. So, of course, we're frightened of robots. But I think we need to get to the point where we see it as a really, really good opportunity rather than as a threat. Because actually what robots and what technology will do for us is free us up to do much more interesting things. In the industry that I come from, very much as Suzanne has already said, you know, in manufacturing, all the research shows us that automation will have a net positive increase in employment. There will be job creation as a result. The types of jobs will be very different. That frightens people. And there's all sorts of questions I'm sure we'll go into later about how we get people to the level where they're ready to take on those jobs. But the point is that's a huge opportunity. What technology will allow us to do is be more human, right? It will automate, particularly in manufacturing where the tasks are very repetitive and mundane and you know, mind-numbing to some degree. By automating those things, we can free people up to do much, much more creative things, which is what people are supposed to do. It's how we progress the human race. So actually, I don't think we are frightened of it. I think we're very positive about it.
And Chris, that has been the story of technological improvement and innovation through time. Technology has been a great creator of jobs.
Yeah, it's always been a great creator of job, a great force for societal progression, and at the time, scary to the people adopting it. And it's not a new conversation. I mean, we've had it in automation for 140 years, dating back to the cotton gin and factory automation in New England. You know, we've had it in chemistry, biology, medicine, et cetera. It's on us as a society to find ways to solve these problems and, you know, do things in the right way. But ultimately, technology implemented correctly, 1, is better economically, 2, better societally, and 3, required to keep feeding and clothing ourselves in 10 years.
Just a point on this before we then move on to some of the more positive aspects of this. Whilst technology has created more jobs overall, many more jobs overall, there has always been a gap in time where jobs are destroyed first, then the new jobs are created. What's going to fill that gap, and whose responsibility is it?
I actually would disagree on that point, because we see that there are studies looking at this distractional effect or this change effects, and usually we see that this is over the working life. So usually people do keep their jobs or do similar jobs, and so the next generation usually is affected, that certain professions are not longer existing. So I think we still have enough, we so far have enough time for retraining and re-education, and to kind of reshape our educational system to be in a good state before we actually see a mass effect in that case.
Jessica, you've seen this in Wales, which you know very well, that old technology, coal, died out, and there's a whole generation of former coal workers who have not really found a function in the workplace for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely, and we should have seen it coming. You know, we knew that coal, a mine in its own right, couldn't be there forever, and we didn't act. We didn't think about what would happen when those coal mines shut, and as a result, you know, as you've just said, there were huge populations of people around South Wales that were totally displaced. The skills that they had acquired over, you know, a couple of generations in mining, there were even mining universities in South Wales, and the skills that were acquired were not applicable anywhere else. Now, as Chris has just pointed out, this has happened over history. We know this is coming. As Suzanne said, we've got enough time to see this coming. Most of the technology is not really near maturity just yet. So I think there is a shared responsibility amongst businesses and amongst government to put in place a strategy and to be very, very deliberate about the use of technology. So we don't just invest in technology because it's the thing to do and we're worried that we're going to get left behind. We invest in technology because we're deliberate in what we want to achieve, and we have mapped out and we understand the consequences of implementing that technology. And if we can do that, if we can be strategic about it, we can plan and we can put in place mechanisms that stop a repeat of the mine closures in South Wales.
Do we need a tax on robots?
Oh, absolutely not.
so that they do the work, but the economic benefit is captured and distributed to society as a whole.
I mean, I think the whole concept of a robot tax plays into the fear side of the argument, that somehow they're taking benefit away from us, so we must tax them. That's not true. You know, I mean, going back to the actual statistical argument that robots and automation have, always will been, and for the foreseeable future will continue to be job creators. No, we should be making it easier to adopt robots. I mean, if you actually look at countries as implementers or non-implementers of robotics, the ones that do are the ones with the best employment, the highest GDP, et cetera. Where I think we do need to start looking creatively, though, is at exactly that Wales problem you mentioned. Because if you look at why those workers got so largely displaced, what they were trained for was very task-specific. You know, if you look at the new economy skills, they're all very heavily in math, especially. So if you were spent 20 years being trained to whack a rock with a pickaxe, you probably have not remembered calculus too well. And there's tons of entry-level coding jobs all throughout Wales, England, America, you know, that can't be filled and would be perfect for all these folks no longer able to work in coal mining or more hazardous fields.
But you,
the math
you need to do geometry to work out the angle of which to swing the pick,
right.
Of course.
And that's
Suzanne,
the thing, but that's actually a great point, right? Because it's not like these are fundamentally less intelligent people. We just have not maintained the right skill set in their brains. They can learn these things. There are ways to do adult retraining. We just have to focus on them and do them.
Suzanne, robot tax.
Yeah. I think a robot tax would definitely deter badly needed investment in robotics. We need more of that. We need to empower SMEs. So in introducing robot tax would massively endanger our SMEs, the competitiveness of our SMEs. That's one point. And the second point is usually taxes are a national thing. So tax is introduced in a single country at a certain point. Will never be something like a concerted introduction of a robot tax on a global scale. So the first country that introduces a robot tax will immediately face a withdrawal of investments. It would have to face companies moving their manufacturing and production sites to other countries that are more attractive to companies.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about then, if our proposition is that robots and automation will assist humans rather than replace humans, what are the ingredients that we need for that to be most productive and most successful? How does it work in practice on the factory floor?
Yeah, of course, we have to make sure that the skills are right. We have that, we discussed that before. I think that we have to have a concerted action between companies, between governments, and also with the educational bodies in the countries to define the right measures and the right skills. First, I think we have to think about which skills are definitely needed. We see that technical skills are of massive importance, added up with ICT skills. So far, it turned out that it seems to be easier to train people basically in technical skills. ICT skills then can be acquired on top. It doesn't work the other way around. So with that concerted action, we finally get to the workers that are urgently needed. Our industry is facing a lack of qualified workers so far, and that's hindering development. And then we also...
Sorry, just for one moment. That's a very interesting point, because we sometimes assume that labor shortages, skills shortages, might ease in the future because robots are doing more of the work. Actually, it creates a whole new set of skills shortages because you need skilled workers who have been trained in how to work with the machines.
Yes, we need operators for the machines. We need programmers for the machines. We will, in the future, even need new skills and professions like data scientists that do train our systems in the way that we can also benefit from the newest technologies advances. And right now, especially the manufacturing industry is in strong competition with the services industry, with financial sector, with banking. They are just able to pay higher salaries, and they compete and they win the game. So actually the small and medium-sized enterprises, and we do see a lot in our industry, do have a problem with that.
Jessica.
I think there's different levels to this as well, right? So as a business, if you're going to introduce robots and automation, you have to be really, really careful and deliberate in the message that you're sending to employees, right? So I can think of an example, maybe the first project that I ever worked on that included robotics. And we did it behind closed doors. And you can imagine how people must have felt thinking that this stuff was going on behind closed doors that was going to replace their jobs. I mean, what they didn't know was that we had a plan in place to ensure that they were going to be, reskilled, upskilled and retrained to go into, better, more interesting jobs. But they didn't necessarily know that. So the impact on them initially, was quite negative. And we made a very conscious decision to actually take the development out onto the shop floor. So before the robot was even ready to go into operation, we brought it out with the engineers and we did it, in public view. And we actually invited the operators to come along and meet the robot and talk to it. And the difference, you can't imagine, within 2 weeks, it had a name, it was called Eric, and the second one was called Erica. And it was really, really positively received. So I think as businesses, we have to be so, so careful about why we're doing it and the message that we're sending.
Suzanne, quick reaction.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point you make, and we're well aware that it's important to involve the workers. We have very good experiences, including the trade unions in this task. So especially the trade unions in those countries where we see a larger share of automations that are already knowing about what we are talking, they are pretty much in favor of introducing further automation because they know that the game, it's not about human labor versus robots and automation and machines doing the jobs. But in a lot of cases, the question is, do I keep the manufacturing on this site, in this country, or is it moving to somewhere else where the labor is cheaper? And so it's, if you're looking at a certain manufacturing site, you definitely also have to inform people, and this is well understood, that this is rather supporting their job than killing their job. And it's a chance and an opportunity we have to take, otherwise we will lose in that globalization game.
So Jessica, when we are identifying these ingredients for success, skills, we mention again and again, transparency is the example that you've just given. What other lessons have we learned from the journey so far?
I think we just need to be positive about it. You know, I think we have to remember, it's interesting that you bring up trade unions, right? So people can sometimes see trade unions as being a little bit of a barrier to getting things done. Certainly in the UK, it has been difficult. If you bring them on the journey, if you are open with them and you do engage with them in the right way, they will understand that we have to do this. This is a matter of evolution. This is not, you know, something that maybe the big companies will do and the little companies can't. We have to move with the times. And if we do want to be competitive with markets that are, you know, cheaper in labor, etc., then we've got to start embracing this technology. So for me, it's how we change the mindset and how we create a positive perception of technology.
And I do wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think on the other side of the table, as the people investing in and building the technology, we also got to make it a lot easier on people. So, I mean, one of the things we look at, like very core when we invest in a company, is from the spectrum of, you know, Welsh coal miner to PhD in robotics, how close to this side can you be and still use this? I mean, there were some really cool presentations yesterday about the democratization of manufacturing, using, you know, VR and gamification to get, let's just say, advanced design accessible to people with non-technical backgrounds. You know, that's a big part, in my opinion, of closing the gap, because if you don't need a 8-year technical education to use these things, they're a lot less scary.
You also have to identify why the robot is there. What is the task that it is supposed to do? Because they don't fix everything. They don't solve every problem in the workplace.
Yeah, spot on. And I've seen many examples of where, you know, a business has a particular repetitive task, and they say, okay, we'll just take that person out and put a robot there, and within 12 months we'll achieve a return on investment. Yeah, okay, fine. But if you stand back and look at that process, more often than not, there are much more simple ways that you can change that process such that you don't even need that technology or that automation. I spend a lot of time in Japanese factories, and it's quite interesting how over-engineered a lot of things are there. And sometimes, you know, you see these crazy transport systems, these, you know, robots inside robots, and everything's moving and going out, and you can just use gravity, right? Sometimes it really is that simple. So we have to be careful not to become too technocratic as well, and to really just take a step back and as we've said several times, understand what we're trying to achieve.
And Chris, this is of interest to the people that you represent, because they want to know that the money that is being invested in such and such an automation process is actually going to deliver the promised return, that it's not wasted money.
Well, no, and I mean, there's an economic efficiency argument to all this at its core. And, you know, well-implemented automation does return people money, it does protect people's jobs. But I mean, more importantly, like, it lets, if communicated well, it lets, let's say, investors, employees, you know, what have you, know that this is actually moving society forward, not backwards. And that's important.
Suzanne.
We also have to look at certain angles. We have certain tasks that are definitely, from a technological side, really hard to automate. But there might be other tasks that actually we could develop robots doing that. But nevertheless, they might never be brought on the market because they will never ever be economic feasible to do that. So if you think of a robot in a hotel that's doing the beds, changing the linens, it's I think at some point in the future we will have robots that would be capable of doing so, but it's quite doubtful that they actually will be doing so on an economic scale. There was an example of a hotel chain in Japan that actually started employing a lot of robots for reception, for room service, and so on.
I think I know the one.
The latest news was that a lot of those robots have been displaced and lost their job because they were so ineffective that they would rather impose more work on the humans.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a really cool story, right? Because, you know, the robots get fired too sometimes. And ultimately, I think what we're going towards is that, I mean, robots are our coworkers. And just thinking of them that way makes it a lot less scary. So like when we're doing a feasibility study before we invest in the company and whether or not this is actually getting adopted, you know, one of the things we do is we actually talk to the workers in that field and be like, look, if this thing's here, this is what you're doing afterwards, this is what you're doing now, is it better for you? And typically people say yes, you know, because if your robot coworker is the one lifting the 50-pound packages and you get to sit in a comfy chair and guide it on your tablet, I don't know very many people in the delivery field that hate that, you know, and that example permeates.
I think robots as co-workers is a really interesting example. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that suggests how human a robot looks. You know, there's almost a point at which they're quite cute and then all of a sudden they become quite scary. And there's a lot of research out there about, you know, do you give it a smiley mouth? And I saw that some people found this very condescending, you know, the robot was smirking at them. But then perhaps by putting eyes on it, and the eyes are able to move and show you in advance where the robot is intending to move, actually that's quite comforting. So there is a level as to how human we make these things and how much we can accept them into society.
Well, no, I mean, that's like just a fascinating point right there, because I mean, you never give a robot a face, but you should always give it eyes. Why that's true, I don't know, but it is.
There is a question about the scale of investment as well and the sums involved, which can be pretty substantial if it's an extensive industrial process. And it does leave you wondering whether the economic benefits of automation and industrialization in terms of productivity, whether they are going to be scooped up by the largest companies because they can afford that investment in the first place. Where does this leave small and medium-sized enterprises?
Well, of course, if you look at the history of robotics, it have been mainly large-sized enterprises deploying robotics. The two largest markets of robotics are the automotive industry and the electric and electronics sector. So both of them cover up currently about 60% of the robots sold globally each year. But the next step will be focus on SMEs. We see that the growth rates also are quite saturating in those markets. So if we, the current developments of the big robot manufacturers go towards easy-to-use robots. We have probably touched upon the field of so-called collaborative robots that are safe, in a sense that they can directly interact with humans. I mean, you see those big industrial robots in front of the stage. They are covered, and whenever they are moving, I mean, fortunately, they are now not moving. When they are moving, I don't want to be near them because if they touch me, I might lose my life. But that's why safety is important, so they are moving only when there's no one around. But this new kind of collaborative robots will enable us to work close with the humans, to kind of hand guide teach robots. So the interfaces on teaching those robots do get more intuitive, and that's definitely what we as a robot manufacturing industry have to deliver to the customers, make it easier for them to use. The big companies can afford to send their staff in a one-week training course to learn how to train the robot. But the SMEs definitely cannot. They don't have the money, they don't have the time, so we have to deliver the right technology to make it easier for them to use that, to enable them to bring up all kinds of services also dedicated to their different industry applications. There's a huge industry between the robot manufacturer and the end user company of a robot right now, which is a system integrator that knows the application and helps the company to introduce those robots. We need to overcome this.
Well, I'd almost actually take the opposite approach to that, because if you look at a lot of fields, where there's small, medium, and large enterprises, it's not that the large enterprises are better adopters of robotics because they're large and have the resources. They are the largest in the field because they effectively automated what can be automated and had a good strategy at it. So, take a look at Amazon, perfect example. Look at logistics and delivery as a whole. It's the people that become the big ones, and these are startups and big companies. They're the largest adopters of robotics on Earth, and they do it in a collaborative, human-centric way and pay their people better. So if you compare big delivery company X, they're going to have more robots, their humans are going to be better paid, and there's more humans per factory. Little mom and pop shop is mostly people in a room not being paid very well because they're not as effective.
I really think there's middle ground to this as well, right? So larger companies do typically have more resource. We can talk about, long-established larger companies as opposed to maybe the younger ones that have grown quite rapidly, like your Facebooks and like your Amazons, etc. Now, maybe it's not necessarily a bad thing that large companies have the resource to invest in these things, because 9 times out of 10, they don't go right first time anyway. So as a small business, and certainly I know in the UK and I think in Europe more broadly, we are seeing much, much more growth within the small and medium enterprise. Actually, in certain parts of the UK, we're seeing withdrawal of some of the large companies as well. So we're seeing a domination of SMEs. And so is it a bad thing that larger businesses are trying things out for us in advance? You think about the VHS and the Betamax argument, for example. Was it a bad thing that some of the larger corporations fought over which was the best standard before the rest of the market adopted it? At least from a risk point of view, the smaller businesses, if they just wait that little bit longer, they know that what they're getting is mature enough and ready to go into operation.
But given the scale of the challenge that Suzanne set out, is there an argument that there is a role for government, for public policy makers here, and we have some in this room with us today, that there's a role for them in intervening to ensure there is support for small businesses to catch up with the levels of investment by larger companies?
So personally, I'm a little bit nervous about government intervention, but I definitely think that there is a role for governments to guide. So for example, in the UK, we've recently introduced the industrial strategy, which sets out the economic priorities for growth over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and then also sets out the skills that we will need in order to satisfy and achieve those levels of growth. I definitely think that there is space for governments working with expert institutions to develop those kinds of guidelines and to educate the public and businesses more broadly.
Well, no, I think the example you brought up earlier is perfect for how government intervenes. If you look at that, go back to that coal miner example, it wasn't to the company's benefit to teach their coal miners math, but it was to society's benefit that we had something in place to get them out of the coal mines and into new work. And that's a perfect avenue for government.
Yeah, let me just expand on that a little bit as well, because you're totally right, Chris. So again, in the UK, what we've recently introduced is a whole set of quite radical technical education reforms. The idea being we recognize that with the changes to skills that are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, we need to be creating pathways, not just for 16 and 18-year-olds to develop those skills, because we recognize that there's a shortage, junior coders, etc. But actually, we need to create a vehicle for people who are already in the middle of their career to be able to change paths or upskill, etc. So we've introduced apprenticeships that are designed by businesses, but they are designed with the support of academics and with the support of people who are doing those pieces around what does the future of work look like. So yeah, I think that is an example outside of taxing everything of where government can certainly intervene.
Recognition, Suzanne, that in an automated, industrialized, knowledge-based economy, that learning has to be continuous throughout your working life and beyond.
I think that's one of the areas where government support would be most beneficial, is actually supporting the companies to establish those training schemes that do enable the workers to keep up with the changing requirements. I think that the large companies, coming back to this large and small enterprise discussion, the large companies do have much more resources to cover up on that, but the SMEs do or will have a problem to support their workers in the way it would be needed. So I think there is a good chance to support companies in this field. I think we shouldn't do kind of incentivation of investment or direct force of direct investment of governments into these new technologies, but rather supporting the companies to be able to do so. I think we could also need more support in the research that is needed to bring technology developments into the application. I think that's something that is lacking. We have certain money invested in academia, but we have to fill the gap between the prototypical development in academia and the final product on the road. And I think that's very important. I think that government could support companies massively.
And when we talk about skills, and we've already discussed this at some length, we've talked about the role of government, the role of companies. There is a responsibility on the individual to ensure that their skills remain at the forefront of their chosen profession.
It definitely is a job of the individual to take care of its individual career path. I think every system we think of where governments, education systems, and companies collaborate wouldn't work if the worker at the end says, but I don't want to participate in a training course. So I mean, that's a certain, should be in the personal interest of the worker. Of course, it should be supported that you don't have to do all in your leisure time. Maybe you have to have some split models, how to financially stem the training efforts. And
well,
yes.
I mean, I do think there is individual responsibility, of course, but there's different questions as to whether or not there's individual responsibility versus whether the systems are in place for individuals to get the help they need. And, you know, if you look at what the current need is, people coming from heavily manual fields going into heavily technical fields, you know, it's not like it's very transparent to those folks that there's something out there that can help them learn coding. That's where the responsibility, I think, shifts to societies from individuals, because yes, individuals need to get help, but we as a collective need to make sure that where it's in our best interest collectively to help these people, they can find the help and get it economically. And that right there is not there yet. So that's I think, pushing up to the society level, not the individual level.
There are actually some AI systems that could, or being developed currently, that could help us in that respect to see the individual skills of the workers and to match that with the skills of a certain profession. So I think we have a lot of skills in the economy, in the workers, in the employees, and we have many companies don't find the appropriate workers for their jobs. And I think if we enable, using our technology, the match, and to support the worker in seeing, okay, maybe I have to develop this one certain skill and then I'm qualified for a different job, or maybe that, or a set of that, and maybe also giving some advice how to get that, what kind of supportive measures you can base on and rely on. I think that would be a system needed for our society.
I think as individuals, including ourselves actually, we have to remember that there is no job for life anymore. So in Wales, we call it jobs for the boys. So everyone who went into the council stayed in the council forever, and they were pretty much protected, and you know what I'm saying, right? So I think we need to remember that. And as individuals, we do need to ensure that we have currency in the market. Where the broader societal piece in government comes in is, how do we know the exchange rate? So how do we, and where do we go to exchange? So education and upskilling needs to be accessible. But before it's accessible, it needs to be obvious as to what kinds of skills we need. And I think you're absolutely right. We don't have that clarity yet.
Two further developments just in the last 5 or so minutes of our discussion. We've mentioned obliquely machine learning and artificial intelligence as part of this industrialization. And it is the obvious next stage, is that as well as machines working alongside humans, you have machines that learn, become more human, and that learn greater skills. How does that change the dynamic of the relationship with the humans who work alongside them as the machine becomes smarter and smarter?
Well, but again, I think it goes back to the wisdom versus judgment comparison, because the machine's not becoming generally smarter. It's becoming smarter in one narrow context where you're training it. So, I mean, for example, even if you get a great self-driving car one day, 25 years in the future, or 10 years in the future, or whatever is plausible, that robot driver is not getting out of the car and going into its kitchen and making a taco. That generalization of learning and skill development is still uniquely human. And that's kind of the encouraging aspect when you look at this whole machine learning thing. Yeah, it gets good at something repetitive and boring, but it has no life skills. So don't fear it.
There is a saying in Japanese manufacturing, particularly within Toyota and the TPS system, that you have to invest in full participation. So that means you have to use the brain power of all your employees. And it doesn't matter what robots, what AI, what technology you bring in, you are never going to beat the collective brain power of your workforce.
Suzanne, you were nodding in agreement there.
Yeah, I completely agree to that. So we never should forget that, as Chris said, we won't have robots that are as intelligent and as autonomous as humans are. They're good at certain tasks. But we also should never forget robots are a tool for us. They are designed as a tool for us, and they serve as a tool for us, and they are not taking their own decisions to outpower ourselves.
How close are we to what has been termed dark factories? Factories entirely composed of robots, no humans at all.
We've seen such factories, but they are rather in the minority. So theoretically, that's possible that if you have a 100% autonomous production, automated production, you have the workers that do operate the machines, sit in an operating center, and the rest of the factory is dark. But whenever you have some stopping of operations, you have to turn lights on, and the human operator has to get into the factory and find the cause of fault and restart the system again. So actually it turned out that a lot of processes are not yet fully automatable, and with the new kind of robots we are seeing coming, the collaborative robots, we also do not plan to have a full replacement and a full 100% automation without human involvement.
I think maybe Germany is possibly slightly ahead on this, but certainly in my experience, a lot of factories just need to go back to basics. I was really enlightened, actually. I spent a lot of time I spent last week in Japan visiting several factories mostly within the Toyota supply chain. And I did not see one digital KPI board. I saw very few andons. I saw, maybe a handful of welding robots. But on the whole, everything was pen and paper, literally pen and paper. And I mean, that sounds crazy, but the philosophy is that if every individual is engaged in writing down their quality targets and their achievement and their production achievement, etc., if every employee is responsible for that, then actually we don't need big flashing screens telling us what's going on, because, we already know what's going on. So I think there's a lot that can be said for just going back to basics.
Chris, this has got to be the investor's dream, though, that you have a factory without humans. Humans are expensive, they make mistakes, they injure themselves, they die. Robots avoid all of this.
No, but I think, as she very well pointed out, you still got to get humans in there sometimes. So if you have to shut down the factory to get humans into the previously dark environment for 3 days because it's not built for humans and machines, that's not an economically competitive outcome. And yeah, there will be dark factories, there will be purely human factories, but I think those are going to be economically less competitive ends of the spectrum versus a really well thought out manufacturing operation that uses people at what they're good at and machines what they're good at.
And just to bust the myth on people hurting themselves and killing themselves, actually in the Toyota factory, they'd gone 8,000 days without so much as a paper cut. That's impressive.
That's something I can't even manage in my own kitchen, let me tell you.
Talking about factories and emergencies and people getting hurt at factory, in robotics, we see that almost all bad accidents are caused by human fault, not by machine fault.
Okay, give us a glimpse of the future. We've had an interesting discussion on how humans work alongside robots, how automation is augmenting human capacity rather than replacing it. What is science fact rather than science fiction? What does the future look like?
I think the future brings a lot of opportunities for us to get rid of even more dull, dangerous, and dumb tasks we usually have to do as human workers. I fear that we don't get the robot that can do everything in the household. I fear that still in 10 to 15 years' time I have to clear my dishwasher again. But I'm really curious what will come. We will see a lot of new technologies. I don't think we will change the world drastically in the next 10 years. So I'm
Jessica, science fact rather than science fiction.
Yeah, actually, I think the opportunities for manufacturers in particular extend much beyond just automation. So thinking outside the factory, I think there is huge opportunity for manufacturers to transform their position within the supply chain. Typically, as manufacturers, we feel the squeeze from everybody. I think as supply chains start to develop and there is more transparency, that we have more opportunity to create more value-add services. And I think that's where humans will play a huge, huge role. So I don't think we've seen the last of people.
Thank you. And Chris, a 15-second glimpse of the future.
I think the future looks a lot like today. Our homes are going to look a lot alike, but 15 years from now, there'll be 20 robots in our house smarter than us. They'll look like our fridge and our toaster, not giant Rosie the robots. And, we're going to have more time to do what we're good at, do the things that humans actually are meant to do. It's not a scary future, it's a happy one.
A wonderful and insightful discussion. As they leave the stage, please join me in thanking our panelists, Dr. Suzanne Beeler, Jessica Lee-Jones, and Chris Murder. Thank you very much to the three of you.
Big thanks to Declan Curry for moderating a really fascinating discussion there. I enjoyed it very much. And of course to all our distinguished speakers. And thank you for your contributions as well. Now, this is the end of our program in the forum and the last days of our GMIS. I hope you've found all the sessions here today useful and informative. We've been able to listen, to discuss, question, and I'm sure take away ideas and thoughts on how we can formulate new possibilities in the global world of manufacturing and industry to benefit all on the planet. Please remember to collate your feedback so we can keep that communication alive between the summit partners, guests, and contributors. One of the key aims, as you all know, was to bring key people together. So it's important that all of us share our lessons learned to form action plans and points for the future. Very shortly, people from other sessions, they'll be joining us for the closing ceremony, and it'll start soon. So please do stay seated now. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fantastic 3 days here at the Global Manufacturing and Industrialization Summit 2019 in Yekaterinburg, Russia. Our aim was to help facilitate productive dialogue and create an environment that allowed for open discussions around the future of manufacturing. All this in an age of unprecedented technological change. And we've managed to do just that. We're proud to say that all the discussions, workshops, and talks have led to a true meeting of minds, the opportunity to share expertise from across the globe and discuss how to tackle the rapid growth of 4IR technologies. It's proved to be invaluable. We hope that these conversations will continue long after you've left this forum. We also hope that you've made some meaningful partnerships which will lead to fruitful collaborations. We'll begin our closing ceremony with an address from Hiroshi Kuniyoshi, Deputy Director of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank everyone who participated in GMIS 2019. Your inputs over the past 3 days have contributed to an enlightening and reflexive summit on the development issues ahead. I'd like to especially thank the government of the Russian Federation, which ensured high-level participation at GMIS 2019 and demonstrated thought leadership and creative solutions throughout this process. I also thank Rose Congress for organizing the logistics and providing the necessary conditions for this successful event. We further welcome the engagement of our co-chair, the Minister of Energy and Industry of the United Arab Emirates. This commitment has been a key element of the success of GMIS 2019. Over the past 3 days, we heard about the potential of nature-inspired technologies and their contribution to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Along with green industry, convergent technologies, circular economy, and resource-efficient, cleaner production, nature-inspired innovation can make a real difference to how we manufacture goods, making them more environmentally sustainable and efficient. There are large differences between countries, regions, industries, and companies concerning their ability to capture the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution. This is reflected in differing responses by countries. As we have heard, some have levied online sales taxes, while others are considering taxing robots. Similarly, countries are prioritizing different sectors according to their comparative advantages. Some countries are investing in Internet of Things. Others are focusing on artificial intelligence or advanced robotics, while again others are prioritizing smart factories. There is still little certainty over the likely path of the fourth industrial revolution. We know that there will be creative destruction, that is, new industrial sectors will emerge and old ones will be swept aside. We know that there will be changes in society that will affect millions of people. Yet, the predictions diverge sharply on how the fourth industrial revolution will pan out for each country. It is therefore vital that we enact some type of effective technology transfer mechanism for developing countries. The revolution must be one that also belongs to the SMEs, to the entrepreneurs, to the family businesses. Let's put in place the framework for the future of manufacturing and the support to help them access it. Development agencies such as UNIDO need to work hand in hand with partners in the private sector, government, international organizations, and research community to best assist countries in their technology transitions. It is only through leveraging our combined resources that we can truly make this a global revolution, creating shared prosperity for all. UNIDO stands ready to cooperate with all partners and stakeholders who value inclusiveness and sustainability in the fast-changing world of tomorrow. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the importance of GMIS cannot be overestimated. Industry has historically been the foundation for achieving higher incomes, decent work, and greater social mobility. Few countries have ever become high-income countries without a special industrial policy focus, and there are strong statistical links between the level of industrialization of a country and overall levels of human well-being. It is, therefore, with pleasure that I note that GMIS is gathering momentum fast. It has already been announced that GMIS 2020 will take place under the auspices of Hannover Messe, the world's largest industrial trade fair, from the 20th to 21st of April in 2020. We look forward to engaging with our German hosts. With this positive note, I'd like to conclude. I thank you once again for your participation in GMIS 2019, and I look forward to our future collaboration. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kuniyoshi. I'd like to invite to the stage now Badr Al-Olama, head of the GMIS Organising Committee, and Declan Curry, who will be our moderator for this session.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. Nadir, thank you so much. Hasn't she done a magnificent job moderating this session over the last 3 days? Let's give Nadir a round of applause to say thank you and well done. And Badr Al-Olama, it's great to have this opportunity to hear from you. You're head of the organising committee of GMIS. We've had a magnificent few days. First of all, my congratulations to you and to your team for the success of the event.
Actually, the congratulations should go to my wonderful team who have really made this possible to give everyone a positive experience about what you've seen over the past 3 days. So if I can ask for one thing from the audience is to give every individual on my team a big hand, please. Thank you.
And that is well-deserved praise. They have worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. What are your highlights? What are your impressions of the last 3 days?
I mean, I wish I could spend more time in some of the sessions. There were some very exciting sessions that were going on, but I took away a few very important statements that were made during the course of the 3 days, and I wanted to share some of those sort of key takeaways with the audience. We heard in the opening plenary with President Vladimir Putin, he spoke about introducing new technologies that would be less resource intensive but more eco-friendly. And that basically meant that we should be inspired by nature, by nature to ensure that clean air, water, food, and quality of life for billions of people can be sustained over time. We heard His Excellency Suhail Mazrou'i, our co-chair, speak about being prepared for the fourth industrial revolution and preparing our students for the fourth industrial revolution. And this was complemented by His Excellency Hussein Hamadi, our UAE Minister for Education, who said that future skilling is a must and that we need to update our educational policies and we need to allocate resources accordingly. Our other co-chair, His Excellency Leong, spoke about education, communication, the sharing of experience and best practice is so important to be flowed from developed countries into developing countries. This is the only way that we can ensure global prosperity for all. Minister Mantorov spoke about common sense prevailing, that by introducing protectionism measures and unfair competition, the ultimate victim in such practices is the consumer. And this is why we need common sense to prevail so that we could have more trade between countries without imposing any unfair competition practices. His Excellency Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, our chairman of the advisory board, spoke about AI coming very fast, disrupting companies and disrupting organizations in the next 10 years, most of them in the next 5 years. I'm quoting him on this. And the big statement that he made out there is the early adopters are the ones that are going to come out as the winners in the short term. And I'd like to point out one of the most important sessions that I did attend, which was on the role of women in manufacturing. And we had the managing director of UNIDO, Fatou Haidara, who spoke about women participation being extremely vital in the manufacturing sector. And she made a reference to a data point, which I thought was super important as well. If the gender gap is closed between men and women, then we would see that the world GDP would be boosted by another $10 to $17 trillion. And I think these key statements were key takeaways that I felt were so important that we could continue and ensure that we follow through some of these statements, encourage more AI adoption, encourage more the updating of educational policies, making sure that we can bridge the gender gap, and hopefully, get inspired by nature to ensure that clean air, water, food, and quality of life can be sustained for the billions of people around the world.
A very wide-ranging agenda there, all focused on the key objectives of the summit, but setting out a fairly significant number of challenges for industry in the years ahead. And that must be part of the lasting legacy of this event, that these issues have been discussed, that solutions have been discussed. We now have a roadmap for the future. What is your thought on the legacy and the impact that this event will have?
That's a very good question, Declan. I mean, when I think about when we started planning for GMIS 2019 and we came up with a theme and we worked with our counterparts in the Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade about setting it off as nature-inspired technologies. And after listening to President Putin speak about having technologies that are less resource intensive and more eco-friendly, to me, that is a call for action. And again, it gives me a tremendous amount of honor to announce that GMIS will be launching a new initiative. This new initiative will address a call for papers to invite all our academic network to put in papers regarding nature-inspired technology that can ensure that it is less resource intensive, more eco-friendly. We will take those call for papers and work with the Skolkovo Foundation and other institutes here in Russia to come up with startups, and we will work with the Ministry of Industry and Trade to take those startups and integrate them into industry. This is our new initiative. And this is the legacy we will leave with us here in the Russian Federation.
Which ensures that the legacy continues beyond this event. And that's an important point, that as well as our discussions, as well as our deliberations, that we then go from this session and continue to think about these issues and continue to act on them.
It is extremely important that the Global Manufacturing and Industrialization Summit is about outcomes. We want to drive outcomes, and we invite the rest of the world to work with us to drive these outcomes.
Look forward for us to the next stage in terms of GMIS events, and that is Hanover, coupled with the trade fair, of course, in 2020. And that's another significant opportunity to reshape the future of industrialization.
Absolutely. Hanover Messe is the largest industrial fair in the world. And by having GMIS at the Hanover Messe, we are going to be talking about all the different technologies that are disrupting the manufacturing sector. And we look forward to our participation in Hanover. And we invite all of you and all of your colleagues that are working in the manufacturing sector or the technological sector or the academia or in government to join us in April 20 and 21 next year to be part of GMIS 2020.
Badr Al-Umar, again, my congratulations on this successful event. Thank you very much for this opportunity to learn from the best in global industry. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
And we now look forward with great excitement and great anticipation to GMIS 2020, taking place, as we have said, in Hanover in Germany. Please welcome to represent the federal government of Germany, General Consul Dr. Stefan Kell.
Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be part of this closing session of GMIS 2019. First, let me congratulate the city of Yekaterinburg and the Russian government for having hosted this most important event in this newly built splendid conference hall. You really did a wonderful job. Yeah, we can be glad. A proof of the relevance of the topics you discussed over the last 3 days was the fact that President Putin opened up this conference, and the speech was, like I found, quite remarkable. He centered on environmental protection and on eco-friendly technology for the future, and that I found quite remarkable. Let me also congratulate UNIDO and the United Arab Emirates for initiating this most important GMIS process. Ich komme also auch bleibt. And it is my special pleasure, and reference was made now twice by you, Mr. Badr Al-Olama, and by the Deputy Secretary General of UNIDO, that I'm most happy to announce that next year the Hanover Trade Fair and Germany will host this most important event in April 2020. Not 2021, but 2020 in April. And we are looking forward to seeing you all next year in Hanover. And I say, spasiba bolshoi, das Drzechiv Ganovere.
Until we see you again in Germany and in Hanover. Thanks a lot, and until we see you again.
These gentlemen are joining me on stage for the official picture. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here at GMIS 2019, and we look forward to seeing you at GMIS 2020 in Hanover, in Germany. Thank you.